go live and get ready to start.
All right. We're live.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Upper Thames River Conservation Authority board meeting for January 25th. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Beautiful winter day out there, but it's a little bit chilly, but it's that time of year. So we'll enjoy it while we can and get shoveled out from yesterday's snow. So we'll get the meeting underway. A couple of items as we get started. You'll have noticed that we have Emily Chandler with us today. Emily is our communications and research assistant at the UTRCA, and she will now be doing the hosting duties for our board meetings. So welcome, Emily. Emily looked after the hearing committee meeting last week, and this will be her first full board meeting. So if you have any problems, just get a hold of Emily on the chat feature and she'll help you out. Just a reminder again about muting your microphone when you're not speaking, having your participant and chat windows open. And of course, we have predetermined movers and seconders that I'll be calling upon for all of the motions. And again, just a reminder that our today's meeting will be live streamed on the YouTube channel as part of our requirement to allow public viewing of the proceedings. Our First Nation territorial greeting. We will begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenape peoples, who have long-standing relationships to the land, water, and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Delaware Nation at Moraviantown. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island. I believe we have everyone here today, but I'll ask Michelle to do the roll call, please, for attendance.
Marie Blosh.
Present.
Alan Dale.
Present.
Anna Hopkins.
Here.
Tony Jackson.
Yes.
Sandy Levin.
Here.
Margaret Lupton.
Here.
Nancy Manning.
Here.
Hugh McDermott.
Here.
Paul Mitchell.
Present.
Anna Marie Murray.
Good morning.
Brian Petrie.
Here.
Jim Reffel.
Here.
Joe Salter.
Here.
Mark Schadenberg.
Here.
Alex Westman.
Here.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Michelle. So we already introduced Emily, but we've got some other staff changes, and I'll turn it over to Tracy to highlight those at this time.
Thank you, Alan. I just wanted to recognize a couple of familiar faces, but wearing new roles and new hats right now. So first, taking this opportunity to introduce Brent Verschure as our new manager of lands, facilities, and conservation areas. So certainly a familiar face around here, but with the opportunity that's arisen with Jennifer moving over to health and safety and Alex's retirement, we felt that combining the CA's unit along with the lands and facilities helps us to better align with the new regulations moving forward and our responsibilities for reporting and strategic planning and asset management on all of our lands. So certainly welcome aboard again to Brent in this new role. But also wanted to acknowledge that Brad Glassman has accepted the new role, or changing of position description slightly, by also including the former Watershed Planning, Resource and Monitoring Unit, where Chris Harrington used to oversee, again, to better align with the new regulations moving forward our work on the ground, our research and monitoring, all that informs our broader resource management strategy through integrated watershed management. So with that, Brad's excited to take on some little bit different breadth, but all tying to our work on the ground in his new role as integrated watershed manager. So, and they're both excited to take on these new tasks. So.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. And yeah, congratulations both to Brent and to Brad on their new roles within the organization. And we look forward to continue working with both of them. So approval of the agenda. We have an amendment to the agenda. There was to be a delegation today, and it was sort of a last minute addition. And we were talking to these folks, and they were undecided if they wanted to come to this board meeting or wait. And then they decided they would come. They primarily wanted to talk about an outdoor education program that they wanted to pilot. That was maybe the more pressing issue. But Teresa Hollingsworth and some other staff have been involved with some meetings and some detailed discussion with these people. And it seems like everything has been taken care of at this point. So the Harrington and Area Community Association has asked that they not be a delegation today, but they would like to come at a future meeting and introduce themselves and talk about some other issues related to the Harrington Conservation Area. So motion to approve the agenda as amended. And if I could get Brian to move that and Jim to second it, please.
Move, Mr. Chair. I second that.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions at all on the motion to approve the agenda as amended? I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so I'll call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schattenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. So that's carried. Thank you. Secondly, any declarations of conflict of interest for today's meeting? I'm not seeing or hearing anything there. So third item that we have is minutes of the previous meeting. And that was back on November the 23rd. If I could get Joe to move that, please, and Mark to second it.
So moved. I'll second it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Does anyone have any comments or questions at all on the minutes? Both open and closed session minutes from November 23rd. I'm not seeing or hearing anything. So if there's no questions or comments or errors or omissions, I'll call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schattenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. We'll move on then to business arising from minutes. And item number 4.1, you will see that there was one issue there that we dealt with. And you'll note it is copied and also in the agenda that we did send a letter back to the mayor of St. Mary's and provide him with some other background information. Anna and Sandy were able to get some information from the City of London, and we passed that on to the mayor of St. Mary's as well. There was a request for some follow-up though on sort of what's going on throughout the watershed. And so here's a report that we've got. So can I get Alex to move it and Marie to second it, please?
So moved.
And seconded.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So the report's there for information. And Karen Maskant is also available for any questions. And you can also see that Brad's name is on there as well. His title now is the Manager for Integrated Watershed Management. So we've got those folks available. Are there any comments or questions at all on this follow-up report? And I see Anna. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just through you to staff, I really appreciate and want to thank them for combining all this information, especially on behalf of the City of London. As you can see, there's a lot of work initiatives that the city is doing, putting some money in the budget, but obviously a lot more work still has to be done. But having this information that's available to all municipalities, I think is very important to share. And it's been a great opportunity, just not only being on the board, but as a council member, understanding exactly what we are doing as a municipality and what the CA is doing as well. So thanks again for putting all this together.
Okay, thanks. Tony, you're next. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's interesting to read through the document. I get a sense that a lot of the bypass obviously is related to precipitation during the course of the year. It would be interesting to have it broken down a little bit more for timelines. So was there a day specific and a rain event specific that it was related to the bypass? In other words, was it a 1.5 inch rainfall over a 12-hour period that the event took place, or was it a 3 inch rainfall over a 12-hour period, so on and so forth? But the other thing I think that has me questioning is this is kind of only one piece of the puzzle, and our watershed is much more comprehensive. And I would like to see a more comprehensive package, including all municipality bypasses, not just the City of London. I think, you know, we got to look at the big picture and the accumulative effect of all of those influences on our watershed. So, you know, what is the total sum of all the bypass tonnage, gallons, whatever? I think we need to understand the total influence of the Upper Thames River watershed on the entire ecosystem. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Tony. I don't know if Karen or Brad, if you have any information right now about number of rainfall events or anything you can share at this time, or we'll give you some chance to do some research on that.
I through the chair, I can
Yep, go ahead.
Respond that we really, this, and I agree with you, Tony, this is a limited snapshot of information, and what was provided to us from MECP was those 3 years of data, 2016 to 2018, and that did cover the reports that came in to the ministry through that period. So there was within our watershed, we have 21 wastewater treatment plants, and 6 through those 3 years did not report any bypasses, and 6 reported bypasses as shown in that table. I think going forward from the information I gathered through this exercise that we will have much better information to report on, because what's required now in the ECAs moving forward is that all the wastewater treatment plants will report bypasses, and as well as what's encouraging to me is that there has to be some monitoring of the quality of that bypass, so there'll be a better understanding of the loading coming with that bypass into the river, and as you said, more information on actual flows will help us to understand the issue of the contaminants that come that enter the river with a bypass. So I do think I was encouraged by what I learned through this exercise, that I think information is going to be better for the watershed wide. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. You have any follow-up at all, Tony?
No, that's fine, Mr. Chair. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good, and I think as we get more information, it would be good to sort of have a more detailed report and maybe sort of an annual update. We could just every year have a review of this and what's been happening, and we could easier to keep track of where we're making progress and where we need to maybe have some more work done. So that's good. Brian, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I read this report, again, a lot of good information, but I realize it's such a narrow spectrum of what's happening out there, because when we think about it, these are required. Like, obviously you have London with a very narrow point load going into the river when you have a wastewater treatment plant or any wastewater treatment plant, but our watershed is so large, and so when we're trying to monitor the loading of it, just because you get these large scale events that cause bypassing in a city, you also get that throughout the watershed. And so I guess that's where our water quality monitoring group and flows and everything come into effect to try to get the whole holistic health of the river. Because you have to think that there's much more area for agricultural than there is actually urban, I think, on the river. And all those loading go in. So that makes things more complicated as to where is the actual effluent coming from and the point loads going it throughout. So that's going to complicate things as well as trying to get a read on the whole issue, I think. But it is important, obviously, and I know London's working on it. You have to deal with history. You have to deal with decisions made in the past where they weren't thinking, they were thinking about getting rid of waste. They weren't thinking about maybe the environmental impact of doing so. So it's good to see there is a plan moving forward, and encourage, this is where it's important to really make sure we can keep funding for water quality units and looking at the whole health of the watershed.
Yep, thank you. Sandy, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This conversation made me think about a report I read a number of years ago that I think Karen was involved in, that talked about nutrient loadings throughout the watershed, both urban and rural. Through you to staff, maybe to Karen or Brad, is it possible for the board to get that report? And the second question is there an update to that report that's even planned?
Through the chair, I can respond to that, Sandy. That report was completed in 2015, and that was a very comprehensive across the entire watershed, right down to Lake St. Clair. And that was our first stab at trying to pull all the information we had together to understand loadings across the watershed. It was funded through a program called Showcasing Water Innovation. So we were able to hire a consultant that did some more sophisticated analysis than we were able to do, and modeling that was required. That report did give us our first understanding of sort of the idea that most of the load comes from non-point source in the watershed, and just roughly it was 13% in that area came from our wastewater treatment plant discharge. So we got to get some of that kind of information. We would love to be able to update that. What's happening right now is we're finding a lot of others are coming into the watershed asking for that data and doing their other pieces of research to answer some other questions, like what is Fanshawe Reservoir? How is that affecting the load, the movement of nutrients, and how much is being held in reservoirs? So that's just one example of research being done. But this comprehensive look across the watershed, I should say there's some other universities looking at doing SWOT modeling, other modeling exercises. So work's ongoing. But we were grateful for that research piece that helped us to get started on understanding the loads through these current times.
Great, thanks. Any
Yeah.
follow up,
Yeah,
Sandy?
I guess the biggest question, I mean, the information is helpful, but the actions to reduce it are going to be the biggest challenge. And needless to say, that's going to cost money. And a lot of that is municipal responsibility. Some of it is ours in terms of helping farmers with nutrient management. So it's not going to be an instant solution. This one's going to take a lot of time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe, I know that's been a few years since 2015, but perhaps Karen, if you have that report, we could send it out again to the board members just for their referral, and they can read it over if they get a chance.
For sure.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Anybody else with comments or questions at all? I'm not seeing or hearing anything else. So we have a motion on the floor to receive this report as presented. And if there's no further comments or questions, I'll call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Murray Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Ruffle,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. And again, we have no delegations today. Item number 6, correspondence. And we have a 6.1, we have a letter of thanks there from the Minister of Natural Resources, and good news story there for us. We have a lot of great staff who are willing to be involved. Certainly was not great for the people out in British Columbia, but it's nice to see that we got a thank you letter from the minister, because thanking our staff for being available to help out. And it was nice to see also that the other minister from the Environment, Conservation and Parks was copied on this, just to remind them of the role and the importance of conservation authorities and our staff. So Tracy, I don't know, do you have any comments you want to make at all on this letter?
Thank you, Alan. I'll just add that it was certainly very good to see that several of our staff who are familiar with working around water, are familiar with using water monitoring equipment and field observations, all about water flow dynamics, were able to put their name forward and offer to help. And so again, I just think it goes back to the staff here and the type of work culture that we have, that people are stepping up and looking for these other opportunities and professional development as well. Certainly tragic for BC, but again, it was nice that BC recognizes that unique role that conservation authorities have.
Okay, thanks. So we have a motion here to receive this as correspondence as information. If I could get Anna to move that, please, and Tony to second it.
I'll move.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Mark, you're first.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alan. I don't know if this could start out as more just commentary and then maybe end up with a question, but we've always worried about ministerial zoning orders in Ontario. It doesn't matter if it's our watershed or somebody else's watershed. I've also understood from watching the news and whatnot that in British Columbia, there were certain areas that were, in essence, drained lakes that became farmland. And then, of course, now this backfired on them. That could be 100% wrong, but 100-year storms become 20-year storms, become 1-year storms. Maybe I can get a comment from somebody about how close our watershed would ever be to having something similar like this happen, where there's massive flooding and road erosion and whatnot possibly happening here. What happened compared to what happened there? And I know they had massive amounts of rain, but that's not to say it couldn't happen here.
True. Tracy, I don't know if you want to
Sure,
tackle this or.
I'll start and then I'll pass it off to Chris Tasker. But the unique thing with Ontario is the fact that we do have regulations that try to keep people out of those flood-prone areas, even areas behind dikes. We recognize that dikes do provide a level of protection, but that's just one layer. The first and foremost is to prevent people from being there in the first place. Dikes are to protect existing uses and not allow for expansion of uses and intensification of uses. So having that policy approach certainly helps. There was a study done in the late 80s where it was the same storm that went through Michigan that came through southwestern Ontario, and looking at damages. And of course, southwestern Ontario having those policies and regulations in place, there was virtually no damage. Whereas in Michigan, it was millions of dollars in damage, just because they didn't have those same approaches in place. Again, in the example in BC, I know the area that you're speaking of was really reliant on, pumping mechanisms to keep that area dry. Again, that requirement to protect that infrastructure and the mechanics of it. And if you keep people out of those areas, then there isn't that threat and that need to keep those very labor-intensive activities up in order to prevent flooding. So with that, I'll pass it over to Chris Tasker if he wants to say anything else.
Yeah, we had a few people that asked similar questions about this, and it was hard, given the circumstances, to try and get statistical analysis and reports at the time, like when these events were happening. I did read one article that referred to it as a 1 in 500 year storm, just to get that sort of in perspective. That's not that much more significant than the 1 in 250 year storm, which we use for a regulatory event, and that to me is a good comparison. Some of the questions that were asked was about whether the atmospheric river, whether we're susceptible to that sort of thing, and that seems to be more of a West Coast thing, also impacted by the mountains, but not to say that it's uniquely West Coast. We have other types of events which come up through our areas. We're subject to fall remnants from tropical storms that can come up through this way, any of which could drop significant amounts of rainfall. So it's really a good reminder that we need to be diligent, and that it also, to me, stresses the importance of those programs that Tracy was referring to.
Okay, thanks. Any follow-up at all, Mark?
Yeah, no, Alan, just maybe a comment that we always fear these ministerial zoning orders, right? And all of a sudden, someday there's going to be 5 or 6 warehouses flooded because there's been a big rainstorm. Well, you built on the floodplain sort of scenario. So that's all. Yeah, no, true enough. It's it's been pointed out, we have regulations for a reason, and when you start completely ignoring those regulations and overriding them without any other consideration, you're taking on a big risk. Okay, thanks, Chris. Tracy, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so I'll call for the vote on the motion to receive. Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yeah.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. Takes us down to item number 7, which is business for approval. Item 7.1. We've gone from a high to a low, a good news story to a rather troubling story. So we've all that staff explain some more. They are available for questioning, but we are proposing to send a letter from the board, and I will gladly sign that letter and send it to This is to the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, letting them know about our concerns and our displeasure. If I could get Sandy to move this and Margaret to second it, and we'll get it on the floor for some discussion.
So moved.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. So I'll turn it over to Tracy and Scott Gillingwater, and they can tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, I think, well, the letter in the report has a great deal of detail in it, outlining kind of the steps in the process that we're anticipating. And it's very troubling that so late in the year, after the field season was completed, that these announcements were being made in the first place. And then, of course, finding out that although eligible for funding and probably the best fit we've ever had with the program requirements, we weren't successful. And, you know, it's certainly been heard, some internal rumblings from various sources that, you know, it is something that the minister has, or the ministry staff have been directed from somewhere about eligibility of CAs to receive funding, and so how that happens. So certainly want to put it out there and suggest that, you know, this might be an opportunity for the board to again seek some additional intervention, a plea maybe from the minister to see if that funding could be reinstated or reallocated from maybe some funders that weren't unable to use the funding given the lateness in which the announcement was made about they're even being eligible. But Scott, I wasn't sure if you wanted to add anything further. I know you've got the numbers. It was around 55,000 each year over a 3-year period. So a significant amount of funds that we've been relying on for many years in this program. And Scott does a tremendous amount of work and effort in the field, engaging with youth. I've seen so many kids so excited after hearing Scott speak about his work, and really promoting the authority while he's doing that. So again, very troubling that this approach and this eligibility requirement has come up. But Scott, if you have anything else you'd like to add, I'll pass it over.
Yeah, I think, you know, the report to the board and the letter in question have the bulk of the information. You know, it's been, you know, many years that we've been very successful, and we actually showcase the benefit of provincial funding. So it's a benefit to the province to fund our work because they always show success every year. We're one of the highest profile reptiles at risk programs in Canada and internationally recognized. So not only does that put the spotlight on the authority, but also the province and the work that's being done. And as Tracy mentioned, finding out in November that you are unsuccessful gives it or makes it a very difficult situation in order to plan for the future. So we go so far and beyond even the money that we're provided. You know, I put in hundreds of hours of volunteer time. I spend my own money when there are deficits for the project for field supplies, use my own vehicle, etc. But there's no way I can fill this deficit. Obviously, it's about 36% of the overall species at risk budget and approximately half of my wages. So that's something that is so important to the work that we do because we're able to match provincial money against our federal money. And a lot of times when you write grant proposals, you need that matching funds. So that provincial money was extremely important in running this program. And we're hoping that with the board's support, this will highlight not only a potentially contentious issue with maybe conservation authorities in general and the species at risk program, but for all programs that the Conservation Authority may need funding for in the future. As pointed out in the report, there were some inconsistencies in our meeting with MECP after we found out, and it left a lot of questions and some pretty serious concerns about transparency and how this process works. So I'll leave it at that unless others have questions.
Okay, thanks, Scott. questions from board members? I know, Paul, you had some questions, so go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, two questions for Scott. The first one is, you said you felt that your application met the priorities then both on species and habitat. So the habitat component of your work, does that apply just to the to the spiny softshell turtle, or are there other species included in that?
Okay, so basically, the habitat component benefits multiple at-risk and not at-risk species, even when you're looking at a species level. So in drafting the species risk stewardship proposal, we're forced to focus just on the priority species that they have listed. So in that given year's, application. So it doesn't mean those species exist in isolation, and there are overall benefits for multiple species when you're working with that single species. So we're protecting a lot of these very sensitive floodplain open habitats, which are used by ground nesting birds, which are used by various other turtle species. The edge of the habitat that we help protect from erosion is also used by at-risk mussels and fish, as well as common species as well. So our single species priority already affects a number of other species, but our habitat priority, which we get funding for, impacts all the species that use those habitats. And because we are able to apply for those two different priority types, I think we do have an overall larger impact on a community of species and the general ecosystem that is in that area. So, and we actually focus a lot of our work to impact as many species as possible while we do this type of threat mitigation and stewardship work, because again, you can't view these species in isolation, and they all interact with one another. So our work over the past 28 years has impacted all of our local residents that use similar habitats.
Okay, thanks. Paul, you have another question?
Yeah, and thanks for that. That gives me some more background of what you're actually working at, and it actually, although you're focusing on the one species, it does have wide-ranging impacts. The second question is the dollar figure, and Tracy mentioned 55,000 over 3 years, and you mentioned 36%. So I just want to come back to that. What was the dollar figure actually applied for? Is that an annual figure or over 3 years, and what percentage and of the total funding? And just if you can put that in one package.
Yeah, for sure. So actually the dollar amount applied for from the species risk program over a 3-year grant period was $168,020. So year one, 55,000, year two, 56,000, year three, 57,020. Percentage of the funding of the overall budget, which doesn't include in-kind contributions, so just the cash money, is over the 3-year period is 36% of the budget.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions.
Perfect.
No, that's good to know, because yeah, it wasn't 50 some odd thousand for 1 year. It's annually for 3 years. So yeah, a total of $168,000, and it's not like it's just, well, we missed out this year, we'll apply again next year. When you're looking at 3-year funding, that's significant. Brian, you're next.
Oh, I'm going to defer. I see Scott had his hand up there, so I'll defer to Scott.
Okay, sorry, Scott, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, I apologize. I used the real hand instead of the electronic.
It's okay.
And I just wanted to mention too that if the issues we perceive are occurring, it would mean that we did not get this funding, possibly because we're a conservation authority. And if that's the case, then that would remove ourselves from that funding pot potentially permanently, depending on how the province works. So this is where the issue is extremely frustrating or concerning. So, it's not as if they put a call out for applications and we can suddenly apply this year and everything will be all fine. The concerns we've raised make it a pretty serious issue moving forward with this provincial program. And again, potentially for other units as well, looking for provincial monies for their work.
Okay, thanks. Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, all I can say is that I'm 100% supportive of this. If we have a program, this program has been phenomenally successful. We have a dedicated staff. The public loves this program, and it does wonders. Like Scott said, it meets our goals, it meets the province goals. So we deserve an answer as to why it wasn't funding, and a true answer and accountability through the ministry as to why that is. We've seen a disturbing trend. I hope it's not true, but we just seen this disturbing trend where the current government, who's in charge of the province, has not wanted to, let's be honest, no government in the last 20 years has wanted to fund conservation authorities the way they should, but this one has cut funding even larger. And now we have another trend of where they're cutting funding, presumably because it was a conservation authority. Again, I'm dedicated to making sure that we have funding for this program, and that'll be a question to staff, is if we can't get this funding, how do we fund this program? Because it's so important. It's literally what the Thames River needs. It is what people think about when they see the Upper Thames. I would also encourage staff, if we get an answer of, depending on what the answer comes back, whether it's silence or a negative answer or something from the ministry, we need to reach out to the public and let them know what's happening. And I don't think we'll have a problem with the public stepping up and helping us fund this, because it is such a great program and people can see the results. There's literally little animals swimming around because of this program, and it creates habitat for the rest of them, like Scott said. So yeah, let's send this letter. Let's get a response from them. It's not right. So it should be based off the merits of a program and not who's applying for it. And I think everybody can agree on that. And if that is the case, well, then we have a serious issue on our hands where there needs to be accountability at that level. And hopefully we can provide an engine for that to happen, whether it's through the media or through different avenues. But again, the most important thing is to get this program funded and to keep it going. And so I will ask staff, what is the backup plan? Where can we pull funding from to make sure that this happens?
Okay, Scott, any ideas yet on Plan B?
So we still have a year left of our federal HSP funding, which covers the other half of my wages. We get funding from various sources, but they're generally small funding pots, 10,000, 5,000, 500, $100 donations from the public kind of thing. So it's not enough to compensate for the bigger loss. So we are working hard at putting fundraising documents together that kind of highlight some of our work in hopes that maybe we can get businesses or the public on board. In all honesty, we don't have a great backup plan at this moment because as you mentioned, environmental monies are often tough to come by. And so this is kind of where we're at. So we're working hard to kind of round the troops, our supporters in the past, but doesn't always mean our supporters have money in their back pocket. So this is kind of where we're at and hoping that we get positive word from the provincial government. If not, we will go on as much of a fundraising spree as we can through the media, through partners, whatever we can do to try and salvage this program.
Okay, thanks. Mark, you're next.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alan. I guess my question is looking at the big picture, has the Ministry of the Environment and Conservation and Parks, have they had a lot of their budgets slashed big time that they simply say that they don't have dollars for this program? Or is it the exact opposite where they've got dollars for this program, but for whatever reason, the UTRCA doesn't qualify over the next 3 years?
Okay, I don't know, Tracy, do you want to tackle that one, or who's got the information on that? It's a little bit more higher level.
Yes, through the chair. I don't have the detail on that. I know that all ministries, when this government came into power, really started a hiring freeze. There hasn't been a lot of replacement staff. So I see it from the staffing side, but not the overall budget side. But I see Scott's got his hand up, so he might have been following that a little bit more closely than I have. But certainly seen the reductions in staffing in order to make up for any financial losses. But the program itself had a dedicated amount of money to offer this program. So presumably there was money there, but it's just how it was distributed I think is more of our question. So, Scott?
Scott, can you help us out with that?
I don't have a concrete answer for the amount of money that they have, but what I can say is that during our meeting with MECP, they did say that there was nothing wrong with our proposal. When we asked where it was ranked, they said that they did not have our rank for the proposal and it was not based on rank. So we asked, well, if there's no issue with our proposal and there was no basis of ranks, that is such a great departure from how things had worked in any previous year. So this is what caused us some concern. We know of a number of other organizations and colleagues that did receive funding. So, a lot of pieces weren't making sense. We know money was available, as Tracy mentioned. The program is allotted a certain amount of money. And without transparency of seeing how a proposal is put through the system, it seems potentially an unfair way to administer this program. And when we asked, to be blunt, we asked 5 different times if our proposal was denied because we were a conservation authority. The question was deflected 4 times, and the 5th time, the individual said they were unable to answer our question. So this is where our concern is. So again, this is not a quite great answer to whether or not they have a certain amount of money, but it does show that money is available and something is up, that we didn't receive funding despite a high quality proposal, years of good work, and also a very late notice of denial for the application. So it's maybe a tangent, not quite an answer to that specific question, but I think it helps us understand where we're sitting in relation to that funding program.
Okay, thanks. Oh, Marie, you've got a question or comment?
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you. I was certainly startled and saddened to see this report. It's a wonderful program, and I've seen firsthand how excited people, especially some young people, get when they see Scott and see what he's doing and see the little turtles. But and most of the questions that I had are answered. The one I'm a little confused on, though, is from what I understand, we have the funding is there then for the next year, if that's correct, maybe. But then you said we can't just apply for it again next year. Is it a 3-year program where you can only apply once every 3 years? And so that means there's no funding for 3 years? Or what's the status of being able to apply for this funding, I guess, is the question through you to staff.
Scott, go ahead, Scott.
Okay, so there's a couple of things here. So my main concern is that based on our correspondence with MECP and some of the background noise we've heard about the Conservation Authority possibly being denied for being a conservation authority, is that we would not be eligible for applying if we're just going to be denied because we're a CA. The other problem is so if it did come up this year again, for applications and we thought we had a chance, absolutely we'd continue to apply. But the other problem too is that each year new priorities are set for different species, different habitats. So you're not always guaranteed that you are going to fit the priorities of that year. So if the priorities are so far removed from the work that we are doing, there's no way we'd be able to get funding in that sense as well. So by applying the year that your priorities fit for a 3-year period, you have a very good chance of obviously getting the money for that 3-year period. And in hopes at the end of that 3-year period, the next funding cycle would again have priority species or priority habitats that fit the work that you are, an expert in or doing. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks. All right. I think we've had some good discussion of this, and I think we're all sort of on the same page here. So I'm going to call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Big yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. And thank you, Scott, for helping us out with that one. And let's hope for some positive results from this. Moving on to item number 8 is business for information. The first one we have there is 8.1, which is the status 28 report, section 28 status report. If I could get Nancy to move that, please, and Hugh to second it.
So moved.
So seconded.
Okay, thank you. And we have Jenna and staff available for questions. Any questions at all from board members? Oh, Hugh, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't have that hand thing.
No, that's okay.
On page 52, I forgot to write down the number. It's just one sec. 11721. That should be per south. That road is in the south side of Highway 7 or Highway 8. That's in Searingville, but it's in per south.
Okay, good to know. That's good, thanks. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing or hearing anything then, so I'll call for the vote on that. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Yes, sorry. Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. Item 8.2, we have the 2022 draft budget and municipal feedback, and Tracy's got a report there for us. If I could get Paul to move that, please, and Anna Marie to second it.
So moved.
So seconded.
Good, thank you. And Tracy, I'll turn it over to you for some comments, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yes, thank you, Alan. And through the chair, I just wanted to recognize that, yeah, there hasn't been any additional formal feedback or written feedback from other municipalities. Had the opportunity to present our draft budget to the town of St. Mary's last week and have a presentation lined up for next week with West Perth. Really, the comments from the town of St. Mary's were more focused more broadly and not any specific budget requests. Certainly interested in encouraging more action related to wastewater overflows and bypasses, and also reiterating a concern about representation in the town, requesting their own representation. Certainly he understood the order in council on the formation, but just questioned how that came about. Again, I'm reiterating that the composition of the board was at the request of the province in '93 to reduce the size of the board. And yeah, not all CAs have an order in council. Most CAs have representation by population or through agreement. So there isn't a formality any longer for representation to be through an order in council. I do have a follow-up meeting with Conservation Ontario. We're trying to line up for a time, maybe even tomorrow afternoon will work, but we're suggesting some ideas just again to better understand the process, so that can be provided to the board as well in case there's any changes for representation that are desired. But that's all I have on feedback so far.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. Any comments or questions on this report? Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just get clarification. Obviously, we know Mayor Strathy's view on levy and that sort of thing, but which he has put forward, and of course that's true. The municipal levies are going up mostly because of cutbacks in provincial funding or no funding. But there was also one that he had put forward that he was disappointed that the target funding is not increasing. Was that London's target funding, or was it our environmental targets funding?
Yes, through the chair to Brian, it was our targets funding that we had paused the environmental targets, and that was one area where we were focusing in on broader watershed water quality objectives, and without that funding, we're not able to get out and do more. Again, from the report that you saw early on, yeah, our roles and our responsibilities are more broad and focusing on those non-point sources of pollution. So a little bit of maybe a disconnect there, because there isn't a lot more that we could actionably do with regard to sewage plants and bypasses in order to prevent those bypasses, other than encouraging and engaging municipalities through the shared waters approach, where those actions are through the shared waters approach, and then implementing those actions are the responsibilities of municipalities. So.
Okay, perfect. No, I didn't. There's a scale there, right? Because if we increase the targets, the funding needs goes up, and so. But also, I think we did hear from the last from the report, and hopefully we can. Maybe that's something we can Mayor Strathy, as well as the report from 2015 that we heard that the urban areas are 13% of the loading, the nutrient loading anyway. And of course, so it's a bigger issue. It's very complicated. You would think that, yeah, the larger population centers, but there's a whole lot of land mass out there as well. So it's not a cut and dry scenario. And it's hard, because I think the board did a good job in the last couple of years of listening to municipalities who are struggling and trying to figure out. And so we did cut back on the environmental targets. Unfortunately, that also cuts back on the benefits from achieving those environmental targets. So it's a tough go, but I hear the feedback from them. So.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I don't think there's any room for finger pointing. We have to look at a watershed-wide approach, and there is nutrient loading from agriculture, and also from private septic, and also from wastewater treatment plants in urban centers, and everybody has a role to play and has to worry about the mess they create, and we can't just be blaming it all on a big bypass event or what have you. So it's you're quite right, it's complex. And it's watershed wide. Anna, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe this one's to Tracy through you. I, as a board member, really appreciate hearing back from your municipalities. And I'm sort of curious, is this all that we have right now? And how long do municipalities have to respond? Or if you could just kind of expand on, is this low this year?
Tracy?
Yeah, if I can, through the chair. I think last year Ian was probably in a similar boat. I read kind of the same report last year, and there really hadn't been very much feedback. And I think it's kind of the scenario, because we haven't proposed drastic increases. It's more of a maintenance budget. I expect that's more of the concern. But again, I would encourage all of you as members, and those of you who are councillors as well, to solicit additional feedback from your municipalities. So, but again, given the circumstances this year, I wouldn't expect a lot. I had spoken to many of the CAOs in advance, and the feedback even at that time was, oh yeah, that's in line with what we were expecting. So.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I know that the budget went in a package to my council, and there was no comments or questions. And I know Tracy met with staff at the County of Oxford, and no big surprises there at that meeting. So it does sound like it's been pretty quiet out there. Paul.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, a couple of comments about the feedback from St. Mary's and a couple of questions about the budget itself. I find it the mayor's comments strange that he's disappointed about the target funding being deferred or reduced, because the reason we did that was because of the negative feedback we were getting from municipality about increasing the levy. And St. Mary's was at the forefront of their concern about that. So it kind of confuses me why he's complaining that we cut that funding when the reason we cut that funding was in response to municipal concerns. And the other thing is talk about the bypasses, and the excellent report we had to start out this meeting made it clear that although we have a role to play throughout the watershed in both monitoring and education, far as bypasses by any city's water treatment system, we don't have any legislative power there. That it comes under the minister. So we can encourage London and not other cities to and other residents in the watershed to not pollute the water. But as far as control over London, we don't have any power. My two questions are from the budget, if I may, Alan.
Yep, go ahead,
Okay.
Paul.
Page number 4 of the budget makes reference to capital expenditures, vehicles and equipment, and includes 3 pickup trucks scheduled to be replaced. So I just wondered what's the condition and what's the mileage on those trucks? And the reason I'm bringing this question is that right now it's almost impossible to buy a pickup truck, and I understand the need to stay on schedule to so you don't run into equipment wearing out and undue repair expense. But I'd just like to know that if the 3 we're going to replace, if there's any way we can make them stretch for another year till this supply chain straightens around.
Okay, who wants to tackle that one? Tracy?
I can certainly start, Alan. And yes, we recognize that's been a huge issue with the municipalities as well. And I believe at least one of these trucks may have been even on the purchase order for last year. Just we haven't received it, so we haven't been able to acquire one yet. It may have been 2, but Brent may have some further details, because we do have our depreciation of our assets. So sometimes it's based on years, sometimes it's based on mileage and condition. But there's a few factors that I believe that play into when we decide that a truck needs to be replaced. Brent?
Sure, thank you, Tracy. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Mitchell. Just to provide a bit of context with respect to fleet, specifically the vehicles, as a general guideline for replacement, it's we typically look at a 10-year life cycle. As well, the other component would be 200,000 kilometers for replacement. So as vehicles age, we take a look at them individually and factors such as, have they been used for towing? Have they been used by, the conservation areas for maintenance? Have they been used primarily for commuting with throughout the watershed? Other considerations would be, is there one driver that's typically been using this for the past 10 years, or has there been 10 seasonal staff driving the equipment? So it's a little bit rougher on the wear and tear. So, and most importantly, the vehicle maintenance and the mechanics history of these vehicles is certainly taken into consideration. So as these vehicles reach their life cycle or reach their kilometers, they're considered for either, trade-in, for sale, or to be included in the spare vehicle fleet. The spare vehicle fleet is certainly important. We keep a selection of vehicles in that fleet for seasonal services such as tree planting, stream gauge monitoring, and for park staff to utilize those vehicles as well. So with respect to your question, throughout 2021 and through 2022, there are a number of vehicles that have, not a number, there's select vehicles that have been sold or being considered for sale because they're 15 to 20 years of age, and they're far beyond the 200,000 kilometer range. They're reaching 250,000 kilometers. So are they worth it to keep around and continue to spend money on these vehicles? So as they are sold, and these new vehicles, the capital expenditure that we're referring to, these 3 vehicles, as they're incorporated into the new fleet, the vehicles that they're replacing would then be, likely put into the spare fleet for this year and years forward, depending on their mechanics and their use. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does, Brent, and thank you for, the concern is that it's just a schedule and you go ahead regardless, but obviously there's a lot of thought that goes into the whole operation of the fleet and the individual vehicles. So I just wanted some more information if there was a possibility of saving a few dollars there. My second question is on page 5 of the budget for expenditures on consulting services, and overall it's a 20.8% increase. But when I check the various departments, all of them have either status quo or reduction, and except for 1% increase for almost $382,000. So just if you can just expand on what those consulting and services are and why such a huge increase in that one department.
I don't know, Tracy, go ahead.
I can start off and I'll pass it over to Chris, but certainly the consulting fees required for the dam safety reviews. So huge expenditures. There's some other projects as well that require some other consulting expertise needed in that area. But yeah, with those projects being slated for 2022 here, you'll see significant increases from year-over-year consideration. So Chris, did you want to elaborate more on that?
Sure, yes, if I may. Large part of that increase can be attributed to a major design project going on or planned for West London Dykes. It was initially included in the 2021 budget that was approved at the beginning of the year, and then removed from the revised budget midway through the year and has been put back into the 2022 budget. The reason it was pulled out of the budget is before we can proceed with design work for the remaining West London Dyke, it's important that we get the results from a feasibility study that the City of London is undertaking. That study is for a number of projects that all come to bear on the same general area, from the forks of the Thames downstream to the end of the West London Dykes, past Warncliffe Road, and in the areas just north of the river. So these all have an impact on the design of the West London Dyke, and it was important that we hold off and await the results from the city study to be able to move forward with design work. So it was removed from the budget last year when it was updated, and then has been added back in. That in itself is to the tune of $360,000 or $380,000. So it's one project like that can definitely skew the percentages within a program area, and offset the minor reductions from other program areas where we're talking about, in the case of the program area where this is large capital projects, and in this case, large design work result or connected to those capital projects. So I think that's where that significant increase comes from. And to be expected with a capital budget. So it's kind of deceiving to include those in with the operating budget when it's coming from all activities.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Any follow-up?
No follow-up. Just that explains when I look at a budget and I see an 82% increase in one area. It's interesting. I'm curious to know why that is, and that's a perfectly legitimate explanation. When you're taking on that kind of work, you need outside expertise to do that work. So thanks for the explanation to both.
Okay, thank you. Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I'm looking at the budget, I'm just looking for the plan, because that's what a budget is, just a plan going forward. When we first last year had that update throughout the year, I like that. I would imagine we'd see that again the years are so, they change so much. How are you supposed to forecast what you're going to do throughout the year when things are so volatile? But what I did like this, I saw active planning going on, and staff are the experts in these areas, and I'm seeing them be active and rise to the occasion of different situations happening. So I like to see that in the budget. The thing that concerns me is we have an $800,000 deficit that's supposed to be funded by reserves, and that's obviously not sustainable over a long term. The question to staff is that right now just because of unknown funding sources for contracts, that sort of thing, or is it just we always seem to come out of it better as the year goes on, because I know that there's unknown funding sources, but do we have an actual sense of how much, I'm sure you do, of how much is just funding unknowns and what is actual unfunded liabilities at this point?
Okay.
What's the real deficit?
Is Christine there? Does Christine have some thoughts on this?
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Hello, Christine.
So the $800,000 projected deficit is, you've seen on that page 5, is a combined picture of our operating plans and our capital spending plans. So as Chris just mentioned, combining the two budgets into one is skew worthy, for want of a better word, because the capital spending and operating spending are two very different pots. Now, we present a combined budget there on page 5 because that's what our financial statements look like at the end of the year. What is actually much more meaningful for you in deciding on a budget is to look at the two budgets quite separately. So that's why we give you an operating budget on page 3 and a capital spending budget on page 4. Of those two, the capital budget is largely large flood control projects, largely provincially supported, sometimes federally supported, and very often funded through reserves that have been created over time from capital levies to municipalities. So by and large, the capital budget comes out to zero at the end of the year, generally. And because the spending is of a nature that creates depreciation for the organization, quite a lot of it, we put the depreciation in the operating budget. Therefore, the operating budget is really the most critical part of the budget for you when you're considering how the organization is funded, whether we're creating a deficit, can we absorb a deficit, those types of high-level corporate finance questions. So our operating budget for 2022 is projected to have a deficit of $164,000. It's not a huge deficit. It's certainly not the $800,000 deficit. And we are also expected to create in 2021 quite a significant surplus. I don't have that final number yet. So it's on my to-do list to finish the year end. But if you take a look at the operating budget and see the percentage changes there, you'll get a better sense of where our spending or where our funding might be moving between 2021 and 2022 by comparison. So we have an increase in revenue projected. We have an increase in expenditures projected, which is slightly larger than the increase in revenues globally overall. So that will therefore create a deficit. Absorbing operating deficits from reserves repeatedly, large ones, is not sustainable. But in the short term, the plan is possibly to dip into reserves to cover the deficit for 2022. But we have been creating surpluses for a number of years, and in 2021 we will as well. So that helps supplement the reserve pot. I would be less hesitant to present this kind of operating budget if we expected to be doing an $800,000 deficit for the next 5 years. But because we don't have a very clear picture yet of the funding scenario from 2024 onward, we are, cautiously optimistic that this budget will transpire as planned, or be better. Brian, you had a very good point. We are conservative budgeters generally. We project deficits; they don't often come to pass. So it's something that can't be done on long term, but I don't think we're there yet, and we're certainly not planning to get there. That's
Okay, thanks, Christine. Any follow-up at all, Brian?
If I can, Alan, I was just going to add again to Brian's point and what Christine raised about cautious budgeters. Again, some of these funding programs that we've been involved with, whether it be through Environment Canada or MAFRA or other funders, some of those criteria are not even released yet. So there might be other funding opportunities that arise as the year progresses that we haven't included in this budget because we're not made aware yet. Again, having a different fiscal year end often shifts those types of funding that could come in. So again, it's great that we revise our budget midway through the year, again, to reflect some of those changes over time, but that certainly can be a reason why we're a little bit more cautious at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. Brian, you're muted. Do you have a follow-up at all?
I do, yeah, and I would 100% agree with being conservative. I don't want to see fake money on there. It's not guaranteed, because that's not fair to the budget. It's not fair to the board or anybody trying to make decisions on those sort of numbers. When it comes to the capital deficit, that money is being funded through past allocations to the reserves for a specific period, for specific purpose. Sorry, if they are being funded through budget allocations for a specific purpose, is that not just deferred revenue and not? I guess you got to rectify having a taking out of the reserves and then being put into revenue. I'm just trying to think: is that an actual deficit if we plan for it? Because we have that funding from previous years. That's where it gets complicated. I know our municipality, we fund everything through reserves for capital projects. So if we're going to do a road project this year for 1.6 million, we put 1.6 million in reserves, and then we take it back out to fund the budget. And so there's these different ways of doing things that kind of makes things complex. And unfortunately, I'll admit I'm not up to date on the most accounting terminology out there. I'm glad we have professionals for that. So it's not really a deficit; it's just reallocation of funds, and so we have the funds. We're just using for that purpose, correct?
Any follow-up there, Christine?
I'll do my best. Deferred revenues sit here. We have our spending during the year, and reserves sit here. So when you say you're going to run a capital expenditure deficit, this money is not there. You spend. And then the reserve that you've already created in past years helps absorb that negative. Okay? That's spending out of a capital fund. That's our capital budget. On our operating budget, there might be deferred revenues that exist, money that we've already received that we haven't yet been able to spend, and we spend them during the year. And if there's excess left over, sometimes it gets turned back into deferred revenues for the next year. Sometimes it just gets dumped into reserves. And it's there for the year, the following year, 3 years from now, when you have a deficit in your operating expenditures. So we have a lot of different pots of reserves, and we dip into them for different purposes in different years. But reserve Reserves exist at the end. You don't ever take reserves and call them revenue again at the beginning of the next year. Can't do that because they've already passed through your books. In some year, they've already passed through your books to get to reserves. So reserves really by name are your cushion, your contingency for a period when you have excess spending over the course of a year. Now, because capital spending and operating spending are very different beasts, organizations such as ours, capital intensive organizations, municipalities, tend to plan their capital spending long in advance because those reserves are created over very many long years. So this is how municipalities tend to budget using reserves, with reserves in mind. Every year they dump some into reserves so that there's always that pot available. We're moving in that direction a little bit more than we were a number of years ago. So does that help, Brian? It's complex.
You're muted.
You're muted, Brian.
Oh yeah, it's just helping and understanding how we fund our future capital, our future capital projects. It's asset management. So obviously it's nice to be able to put, if it's a 20-year project down the road, it's nice to put that away and then it's there, you can withdraw it from reserves and make sure we have it. But obviously if we're pulling out $800,000 for reserve for a specific purpose, I know we're not going to because it's different things happen, but just to use that number, then that's, if it's been planned, that's good. If it's one of those scenarios where we just can't find money to fund something, then it's, as a board member, becomes a bigger issue. And how do we change our policies to make sure that we don't go in that direction?
Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, a multi-million-dollar budget. It's a tricky business, but thank you very much, Christine, for keeping us up to date and informed on all of this. Sandy, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 3 of the budget, I'm wondering through you to staff if we get any comments about the depreciation expense being added, and then people say, well, gee, you got this big cash surplus. Because depreciation is really a non-cash item.
Christine?
And I'm looking at the bottom where the net surplus is a deficit of 164,000, and then depreciation expense is added back, and it makes the cash surplus look that much larger.
Right. Right. So this is an attempt to show on an accrued basis, which is our financial statement standard, an accrued basis, what our deficit will look like at the end of the year, 164 deficit potentially. But for those people who are not so sure about what an accrued basis accounting picture looks like, they think cash. Plenty of municipalities also budget on a cash basis. Many municipalities don't include depreciation expense in their budget. And so if I were to do that same thing, because depreciation appears in all our expenses there in the mission cost centers, it's all buried in there. Because it is, and it's not a cash item, if I want to take out the effect of depreciation and present it the way municipality might, I have to add back in the depreciation expense because I've already subtracted it there. I've already thought of it as an expense to the organization. So now I have to add it back in. So if I were budgeting like a municipality, I would be saying we're going to have a $1.1 million surplus. I'm going to take out the effective depreciation entirely, right?
Yep.
But I don't budget like a municipality and I don't have to. And because we do capital spending and because we are required to record depreciation and we're required to present it on our audited statements, I budget for that. And I just add that line at the bottom to kind of reconcile or provide a different picture. So you could say, we're going to have a $164,000 deficit, and we're going to have a $1.1 million cash surplus. They're the same budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other item, and it really came from this board's direction to staff, is the other revenue line, which includes recognition of investment gains. And I assume that would be on the basis of the investment gains as of December 31st, 2021, as opposed to as a moving target, so that we're not concerned with the ups and downs of the market during 2022. Would that be fair to say, or how are you looking at it?
No.
Where you came up with the 300,000 number, which I think was the direction from the board, but I'm looking at your confidence in being able to do that.
We had investment gains in November, which are going to appear on our 2021 statements. That's going to be part of our surplus. After discussions with Phillips Hager North and the board discussion in October, and the depth of the deficit that was projected at that time, 300 of investment gains in 2022 is still a very conservative number. It's possible we could even take it to double that. I could have put in another $300,000 and wiped out that projected deficit entirely there on the operating side. But I want to be conservative because we expect markets to be volatile. There's still about a $700,000 spread between the cost of our portfolio and what it's worth today. So 300 seemed reasonable and more in line with what the board was thinking back in October, I believe.
Yeah, and given what's happened in the markets in January, I wouldn't want to change that number at all.
Not this week, no. Because the markets have been very volatile this week.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good. Thanks, Sandy. And I know it's about 11 o'clock, and Anna Marie had mentioned that she had to leave the meeting at 11. So thank you, Anna Marie, and we'll see you
Thank you,
next
Alan.
meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Anna Marie,
appreciate it.
should we check if she's available for Finance and Audit Committee again?
Michelle knows my feelings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Sandy.
Good, thank you. So further questions here. I got a couple more on this item. Margaret, you're next.
Well, maybe I'm asking this question because I'm new to the board and this has already been discussed, but I'm thinking about these 3 trucks that are being purchased. Has there been consideration or discussion of turning the fleet to the electric vehicles? Or has this already been done?
Brent, you want to tackle this one for us?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Lupton. My understanding is that through the environmental targets, the strategic plan, it does outline a line item that refers to the green fleet strategy. And so that was a piece that when we're purchasing vehicles, equipment, we're always considering opportunities to, go with a green fleet where the opportunity presents itself and where it fits. So depending on what the use is for the truck, if it's a fleet mechanics vehicle that's towing around equipment, sometimes that's not feasible, but if it's possible, certainly we explore that opportunity. Tracy, maybe you want to add to that?
Yes, certainly. Through the chair, we do have a number of green fleet vehicles in our system, and many of the gators that are used at our parks are battery powered rather than gasoline. But exactly what Brent said, depending on the use and what's feasible, sometimes getting a vehicle for towing, for example, the electric just doesn't offer the same performance or meet our needs. So again, each time a consideration is given if it can meet our green fleet strategy that we have.
Any follow-up there, Margaret?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
No, we'll certainly keep looking for opportunities to be a little more environmentally friendly. That's good.
My understanding is that we'll soon have to be that way. We're coming to the end. So that's really why I ask, and I'm concerned about it.
Mm-hmm. True enough. One more here. Paul, you're next. Go ahead.
Through you to Christine. And Christine, you mentioned when you were answering Brian's concerns that we were going to have a surplus coming out of 2021. And at the bottom of page 5, it shows a surplus of about $2.6 million as of the end of November. Are you in a position to give us a ballpark figure of where the surplus ended up at the end of the year?
Very much ballpark, under $1 million.
Under
Very
$1 million.
much ballpark though.
Yeah, no, that's all I can expect at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Under $1 million's not as good as 2.6 million, but it's a lot better than a negative number.
For a public service organization, that'd be tremendous.
Yeah, that's good news. Thank you.
Well, I'll let you know next month at the board meeting.
Okay. We'll narrow down the ballpark.
That's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. We've had lots of good discussion here. I see no further hands or hear any comments. So we did have a motion on the floor there. Anna Marie seconded it. She's no longer in the meeting. Maybe if I could get Margaret. Could you second the motion then that we have on the floor for the 2022 draft budget municipal feedback? Paul moved it, and if I could get Margaret to second it. Oh, you're muted, Margaret.
Yes, I'll second it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Just so that we're covered there, we've got that done. So again, great discussion. I'm going to call for the vote on this. And so Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray. Sorry, Anna Marie left the meeting. Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. So that's carried. That moves us down to 8.3. And that's the Harrington Number Conservation Areas Heritage Studies. Lots of activity going on there, but we've dealt with the critical one, which was the education, and this is dealing more with the actual sites and the dams there. Can I get Jim to move this report and Brian to second it, please?
So move.
No second.
That's good. Thank you. So lots of information there. We've got Chris available and Teresa for any questions. Any questions at all from board members on this? I'm not seeing any hands or hearing anything. These are ongoing issues and they're going to be with us for a few years. Paul, go ahead.
No questions, but since this is in my neck of the woods, a few comments, and I'm going to start with a long list of thank yous. And I want to thank Chris and Teresa for the report that's in the agenda. And I want to thank Chris, Teresa, Vanny, and Brent for meeting with HACA, the Harrington Area Community Association. Also for the work that went into the presentation that they made at that meeting and their willingness to engage in the frank discussions that took place. They were there for well over an hour. It got heated at times, but I really appreciate them putting themselves out there and having that communication. And I also want to thank all those people, plus Bill Mackey and Mike Knox and any other staff members that remain unnamed that have worked with HACA in the past and in the future about the operations of at the Harrington Conservation Area. I think the proposed nature school is an opportunity to provide education with a different model. There's some pros and cons. And I appreciate Teresa and the rest of the staff that we're open to at least given a one-year opportunity to give this a try. The HACA is very passionate about quote unquote their conservation area. And their goal is to keep the Harrington Pond in its current configuration and to increase the public use of both the conservation area and the antique mill that they've restored and operate. Ultimately, the decision whether the pond stays will come to Zora Council, and it will come down to whether that is a financially responsible thing to do. But all the information that's involved in this report included will certainly be taken into account when we come to make that decision. So I wanted to recognize all the staff people that have been working on this, and thank you for their efforts, and just make a few comments on that.
Well, that's great, Paul. I appreciate that that update and that perspective. That's good to know. Thanks. Mark, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Just really a comment. I remember when the Upper Oxford County Trails Council had a open house day, and one of the themes was the Harrington Mill Pond. I certainly attended the event, and I remember even Marcus Ryan was there, who's now the mayor of Zora Township. So it was very impressive to see the museum that's been set up there, and a very educational institute. So it's going to be something that long-term would be a great for the north end of Oxford to be able to have this facility maintained and enhanced down the line.
Okay, good, thanks. I don't see any other hands or hear anything. So just again, this is going to be, there's some environmental studies here. This is going to be something we'll be dealing with for the next several years. And again, HACA did not come to our meeting today, but they did express an interest in coming to a future meeting and introducing themselves, their new chair and some of their executive, and discussing some of their long range ideas and goals going forward. So we will look forward to working with these folks, especially in Harrington, but also dealing with the Embro site as well. But we'll look forward to working with the Harrington group in the future. So if there's no other comments or questions, I'm going to call for the vote then on this motion. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
You there, Brian?
Yes.
Jim Ruffle,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
Alan Dale.
Yes. So that's carried. Thank you. Item number 8.4 is next, and that's the inventory of programs and services. And Tracy's going to give us a presentation. So before I do that, though, let's get a motion on the floor, though, to receive it. And if I could get Mark to move that and Joe to second it, please.
I'll move it. Yeah.
I'll second it.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Okay. And we'll turn it over to Tracy for this presentation.
Okay, thank you, Alan, through the chair. Emily's going to pull up the presentation on screen and share it. Just want to give a little bit of an introduction of what you're going to see next month. So next slide, please. Because next month is when we'll be wanting the board to approve our inventories of programs and services. So with that, I wanted to give a little bit of background in the timeline today. And the reason why, of course, these legislative changes that we have. High level, I'll be giving kind of the program and services inventory, kind of broken down of what types of things fall into what categories. and then providing some of the examples that we have kind of in a draft format today. And the one piece is the organization of our programs and services, but the other piece is the funding and where the dollars come from. So we've been keeping Christine pretty busy given it's year end, and she's trying to finalize last year's budget numbers and close off the year while still trying to put forward the 2022 budget and of course consider our inventory of programs and services. And that'll provide a little bit about the next steps. So the next slide. Again, you can see this is the transition period, this broader period that we're in. We've finished kind of part one of the transition plan and submitted that to the province by the end of the year. And then the next component is submitting this inventory of our programs and services by the end of February. That's considered phase one, and phase two will be with that inventory to go out to our municipal partners, discuss what those program types are, and if we need to enter into either a memorandum of understanding, contracts to complete work, or if it's something that's better suited to a cost portioning agreement that deals with a broader watershed area rather than just a municipal ask. With that, we know from the regulation, the mandatory programs and services regulation that was released in October, that there's certain things that are considered mandatory for 4CAs to provide. Those being natural hazards, everything from our flood forecasting and warning and operation and maintenance of our structures to our planning and regulatory roles, everything that protects people and property from those hazards. Our conservation lands, including all of our properties, to allow for everything from passive recreation where it's allowed, but also recognize that with any property ownership, there are requirements for risk assessments, for taxes, for making sure that we're insured. Everything that, like I said, goes along with that is considered mandatory, because conservation authorities in the province are the second largest landholders. So I think, especially during the pandemic, people are getting out, enjoying and appreciating nature more, and people are recognizing we need these spaces. So that's become mandatory. It wasn't initially in the consultation guide, so we're glad to see that addition. Our role in continuing to implement the provincial stream and groundwater monitoring network. We often add to that monitoring network and conduct more water quality sampling and analysis, and include benthic and mussels and further indicators looking at fisheries. But it's that provincial portion that is still considered mandatory. And then, of course, our duties and functions and responsibility under the Clean Water Act as a source protection authority. So there are a couple other items that are listed in regulation that don't apply to us. Those being under the Ontario Building Code, North Bay Mattawa are specifically mentioned for septic inspection. So that responsibility is mandatory for them. And then also the Lake Simcoe Protection Act. So not in our areas, but recognizing that those mandatory programs and services do extend to some other CAs as well. So with our inventories, we have to categorize our programs. So those ones that I just mentioned as mandatory programs are considered category 1. And those funding mechanisms are through levy, through municipal levy that can be provided. With category 2 programs and services, I like to think about who's doing the ask. It's usually the municipalities asking conservation authorities to undertake a program. Great examples are for our risk management, to implement the Source Protection Act. We partner with a number of municipalities, not just within our watershed, but within the Thames-Sydenham region to provide that service. And again, it's based on a municipal boundary, not a watershed boundary. The third categorization of program, category 3, are those other programs and services that we think are advisable for a broader watershed benefit. You know, we spoke about that this morning in looking at water quality. It's not by municipal boundary. It goes beyond, because all water flows downstream, and those sub-watershed impacts and are able to be looked at more broadly to then inform decision making locally. In those category 3 are where cost portion agreements may be required. Recognize that often with those category 3 programs, we're often able to fund through other grant mechanisms and through other agreements. Some are part of those services. So next slide, please. So when we were developing our inventory of programs and services for our watershed, again, you have to tweak your mind a little bit to fit into those categorizations. And we'd never usually thought about our programs based on those types of categories. Again, our water quality program is watershed wide. We never really always separated out what part of it is a provincial responsibility. So it did require some different way of thinking. But with CAs in general, we've been meeting as a general managers group to make sure we're trying to find some consistency among CAs. And those of us within the Southwest have been meeting a little bit more frequently and sharing our inventories so that when we are bringing them to our municipal partners and our municipalities, they'll see that consistency, whether it be in naming, in how we're describing the programs. So at least we're all, I guess, singing off the same song sheet. So at least where it's possible. Again, there's some CAs that are offering a little bit different programs because they are responding to a local need or a community need in their watersheds. So we're not all alike. We have a lot of similarities, but it's not always going to be exactly the same. Again, for the purposes of the inventory, the plan is to keep it very high level. This is a broad stroke, and through the process of negotiating these agreements, then that's where more detail will be provided if necessary. You know, kind of that overall thinking of why make it really a lot more complicated if it doesn't need to be. You know, there might be some municipalities out there that are just happy with the programs that we are offering, and yeah, let's just group that together and that's what we want. So again, it's a starting point. As we're going through this process, we're calling it modernizing our program areas with the regulations. Exactly what we talked about at the kickoff of the meeting, and how we're kind of structuring our management group and our units of activities in program areas that align better with these new regulations. We're providing a 5-year average costing just as estimates. Again, there's some areas where that's not going to really fit well. You know, we've been in a pandemic the last couple of years. We've seen the Section 39 provincial transfer payment cut in half a couple of years ago. So there's certainly going to be some anomalies, but intending to at least have a broader understanding of the ebbs and flows of some of these programs and funding, looking at a broader time period to at least develop the estimates. And as I had said, this is an evolving document, and the purpose will be to refine it as we go. So next slide. So I've put in some examples here of how the format you're going to see things, some of the groupings. Again, capturing our environmental planning and regulations and those mandatory programs. You'll see that there's a category column, so it can highlight which category these programs and services fall into, and some of the average numbers. And I'm going to qualify it right up front. Those numbers are changing rapidly as we're going through. And again, I use the term bundling, but I'm told that it's never a good thing when Rogers wants to bundle. But I guess we're grouping things together to recognize some of the efficiencies that, you know, impracticalities that we have with our programs. You know, we utilize staff, for example, in the parks. And I'm looking out at Fanshawe Dam right now, knowing that, you know, our flood forecasters are often asking our parks operations to go out and do an operation on Fanshawe Dam during times of flooding. So again, that would be, you know, it's a park operation. That would be a category 3, but they're assisting with that category 1 work. So again, it's how we can build some of those efficiencies in. And then ultimately, we're going to be providing kind of the overall percentages of where those funding sources come from to paint the picture. You know, we always provide that at the front of our budget package where, you know, 4% from the province, but, you know, that 30, I think it's 37, 38% from levy, but then the remainder all self-generated and through other funders. So again, painting that out by category program too. Next slide. We move into water management. Again, you'll see category 1 programming then, everything from flood forecasting and warning to our flood and erosion control infrastructure programs, and some pretty big dollar amounts when we're talking about those types of programs. And certainly you'll see very little provincial contribution to those programs as well. With our Conservation Authority lands and conservation areas, again, the term conservation areas is in the mandatory programs and services regulation. But because it's there, we're using it. It's not the way we always describe conservation areas, because not all of our properties are open as conservation areas. But you can certainly see a number of our activities related to enforcement, the strategy, which is a new program for our lands, having a land inventory is a new program, and then also our acquisition and disposition plans. All new program components that have been identified here. And then the actual management of our lands, either for the natural heritage component, but also for that passive use as well for some of those properties. Next slide. And then again, recognizing some of these areas where we have agreements with the City of London for ESAs, and that's an agreement that's been in place since 2009. Certainly looking at the campgrounds, although it's category 3, it's also identified that it's 100% self-generated. So these are the types of details that I think will be really beneficial for municipalities to be able to see. But maybe we haven't always broken them down in this level of detail or in this way in the past. Certainly with source protection, you see as the next requirement right now. Again, had to think about how we were going to treat this because we didn't want to be double counting it amongst the CAs. As the source protection lead, we are the recipients of the provincial funds, but then some of those funds are transferred through our office to support the work that's happening at the Lower Thames and the St. Clair. So on their agreements, they will have the Upper Thames as the funding source through agreement, rather than saying it's directly from the province. And then, of course, we have our risk management officials that we're doing through agreements with municipalities as well. Next slide. With water quality and quantity monitoring, again, it's just the provincial piece. We've got to kind of figure out how we're going to break that out a little bit more detailed, because again, it's a lot more efficient. If we're going out and sampling for the province, adding additional sites, certainly there's additional lab costs for the analysis of the water, but not necessarily a lot more effort in that way. So it's still one we're working on sorting that part out. And then, of course, our core watershed-based resource management strategy. Again, the development of the strategy is outlined in the document. It's a mandatory requirement to have that, but many of the programs and services that we offer to deliver on that water management strategy will be through category 3, because it's that integrated watershed management. What we're doing on the ground, how we're engaging our communities, our public, all to do actions that improve water quality, watershed health, and ultimately build resiliency for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Next slide. With research and monitoring, again, bundling everything that we're doing for aquatic monitoring together, recognizing it's not just the water itself. Sometimes it's benthic invertebrate modeling and muscle analysis. It's also engaging with stream classification, the order of the streams, if it's cold water, the thermal regime, and how that fits in. Again, some of that work is done on behalf of DFO. We have other water quality data, the actual database that we partner with additional CAs, even our municipalities as called the Whiskey Hub. The acronym escapes me right now, but water information system to compile all that data. And that data is valuable for not only municipalities to use, but also if there's larger projects, either done with the municipalities through EAs and bridge projects to understand the local conditions, but also to development proponents that are proposing development in proximity to these areas and wanting to know what species are there that they'll have to mitigate for. And then, of course, we undertake additional modeling. An example right now is with the City of London for Dingman Creek. as they're going through that EA, undertaking enhanced modeling to provide back to the municipality through that project. And then we have our watershed stewardship and restoration. I think that one's probably one of our more challenging ones, because in the past we've always kind of grouped and reported things based on funder rather than types of activities. And those activities can overlap. Again, when you're talking about water quality, a lot of those activities that are on the ground ultimately are keeping phosphorus in place to prevent that runoff. So it also improving water quality. The next slide, Emily. You can. The last one that we have here that I've shown is also the community partnership in education. Again, not a category 1 program, but certainly something that engages all community, whether it be through municipal partnerships and programs, through our Friends of groups, and then also in the classroom. Only the components that are directly related to natural hazards education would fall into category 1. These are all the other, like I say, the good stuff that we're doing on the ground to encourage an improved watershed. So that's been spread out. The other part that's yet to come is the enabling program services. And these are the categorization of what we've always allocated. So you'll see some numbers there. Those have all been allocated in previous years in those tables that I've just ran through. But through this new regulation, they're going to be levied differently, but we don't have that regulation yet. So kind of keeping this to the side so we have an idea for when that regulation comes, being able to show how we deal with that now. I think we're probably a little different than some CAs that have never really allocated out those overhead costs to the programs that they're serving. Maybe they've always kept them separate in the past. We've always tried to build that in. There's certainly some tweaks that can be made to how we've allocated with this this next step, because again, it gives us a different opportunity to look at how we're creating our budgets and ultimately how we're going to be reporting on these deliverables. So next slide. What we see in this is kind of our timeline and where we're at. Certainly we're planning to have this in front of the board for the annual general meeting next month for approval, but wanted to give you, like you say, this precursor so you know what to expect. And then with that, you'll see that there's quarterly reports to the MECP to show what progress has been made in negotiating agreements and refining the programs and services inventory, with the ultimate transition date being January 1st. They give us a month leeway to finalize the inventories and send them into the province, and then have till the end of the year to complete many of those deliverables that we've identified in this plan. That we've got to scope out what's going to be required of that work and include that as what's needed for funding. So with next steps, we'll be circulating this at the February board meeting and then circulating it to our municipalities in the province by February 28th. We're still expecting these phase 2 regulations about the conservation authorities levies and municipal levies, but also we're expecting an updated guidance document on conservation authorities fees. Some of that may inform how we set up our self-generated revenue as well. So with these updates, we'll certainly have additional financial steps that we'll be undertaking. And as I said, a lot of the numbers that you've seen right now in draft, I've left the draft stamp on for a reason, because we'll still be refining that in the coming weeks. So if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them, and I'm sure Christine can help too.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. Any comments or questions at all from board members on this report? We've certainly talked about it in the past, but we're seeing as it moves along, now we start getting the categories and the time frames, and as Tracy said, it's still a draft. There's more changes to come. Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, how does capital fit into this? How are we going to assign the category, and how are we clearly allocating the cost? What's been the discussion with other CAs on that matter?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, Sandy, great question, because that has come up, and CAs have discussed keeping that separate, not really part of the programs and services inventory, because those capital costs, as you could see from the budget package today, those are those skewed results, but instead providing kind of a separate table of capital needs in forecasts, so that there's understanding about where those capital costs would come from and opportunities for what's needed. Some of those cases, the capital is directly attributed to mandatory programs, I think in all cases, but they could fall under the category of our structures for flooding and erosion control structures, but they could also occur on our lands. And if it's a capital cost for improving accessibility to our properties, perhaps, but certainly capital costs related to CAs and the activities within the operations of our conservation areas for camping would not be part of this. So yeah, again, the idea was capital can vary so significantly that should be kept as a separate table.
Well, that'll be interesting when that plays out.
Yeah.
Another question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff is, when I look at the table and I see in category 1 a number of places where self-generated revenue is included, does that intuitively to me, that means that we would be able to levy for that as opposed to being self-generated? Is that a sense that you have as well?
Through the chair, yes, that's our understanding, and there's no percentages put in there. It's just kind of a placeholder.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we all know intuitively as well that looking at the pie charts that we have in our budget package, even those mandatory programs, we're able to offset and leverage those funds that we're getting for those mandatory programs, those category 1 programs. So quick analysis, very preliminary, was, even just looking at category 1 lands, the costs of delivering those programs and services exceed what our total levy ask is today.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. And, it's the amount of work that you and other staff and other CAs have had to put into this is really, unfortunately, taking away from some of the other work. It's unfortunate that the province felt that this was important to do in some way, shape, or form, because I'm still not seeing the benefits either for the watershed or potentially for the municipalities that the provincial government was trying to help with this, because, as you just mentioned, it may mean additional opportunities for levy funding as opposed to less. So we'll wait and see how this all plays out, and be interesting in terms of what gets done between now and the provincial election as well. With that, I'll conclude, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. Paul?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I've asked Tracy this question before, and she hasn't been able to answer because she's still waiting for the province to give her the answer. And that's to do with municipal partnerships. And in Oxford County, is that partnership going to be at the county level or at the lower tier level?
Yes, through the chair, that's my understanding. Because the levy comes from the county. However, each lower tier is the participating municipality. So it is a pretty unique situation. But I think my approach is to talk to both. I certainly want the feedback of each lower tier municipality to understand what delivery of programs and services is important with your municipality that we can provide, and then bring those comments back up to the upper tier, who might ultimately be the ones negotiating the broader agreement because it's the levy transfer, but certainly wanting to see both parties engaged.
And a follow up on that. So at this point, are we talking at staff to staff level?
Yeah, sorry, you're breaking up there a little bit,
Okay.
Paul. But
Sorry,
staff to
Tracy.
staff level, that. I think
Staff to
that's
staff at this
I've
point?
been just, yes. I
Okay.
haven't yet with the programs and services inventory until we get that finalized, but then I'll be reaching out to staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff for this inventory and the reminder to from Sandy that we are just dealing with programs and services, not capital. I think I have to just kind of remind myself about that. But there's a lot of work that went into this, and I just want to thank staff because I think having some sort of inventory is going to be important as we move forward, especially as new councils will change. I know at our municipality, staff are changing, and there's going to be some, at least information that should be available. And I would hope the Ministry of the Environment would be able to take this information and the importance of informing new board members and new councils and having a better understanding what each CA does and all those conversations that we've been having for the past couple of years. To me, this is a great way of, don't want to use that word bundle. I would think this inventory would have to be updated on an annual basis as well, just to make sure that it's up to date and valid, but it can help as a resource for the education process of staff and council. I too want to ask a quick question through you to Tracy. I was interested in your comment about the fees. And I noticed when we had the budget conversation, we are relying on our fees quite a bit now. And not knowing or having a better understanding how much control CAs will have on our fees. Is that a concern as we look at the changes going forward? I know we're going to be going into phase 2, but if you can just give me a better understanding, are fees a big conversation here?
Tracy?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Hopkins. I guess I am aware that CAs have always had guidance for charging fees. I think the intent, and I'm just crystal balling here, is to update that guidance document to maybe better reflect how fees are charged between mandatory or category 1, category 2, and category 3. So perhaps there'll be some more guidance broken out by categorization now, rather than a broader discussion about how fees are charged. So I'm not terribly worried about it, I guess, is the summation of that, but it will certainly inform, our processes moving forward and how we develop our fee schedules and our fee policy.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Brian, go ahead.
Sure. This whole I have to agree with Sandy. This whole process is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. My prediction is we're going to get very similar situation that we're in already, with a lot of make work projects that didn't need to happen. I truly wish the province had done proper consultation at the beginning and maybe provided some of these things, and they could have realized how complex running a modern conservation authority is and how interwoven everything is. And that's the problem that you're facing, is how do you pull apart something when it's connected? It's not a simple black and white, oh, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. It's almost an impossible mission. There's going to be some that just can't be done. And I understand the need that some other conservation authorities, and of course we're not perfect, but at the same time, there's a lot of conservation authorities that did need to update what they were doing, but maybe a best practice exercise would have been better than dictating something that they clearly didn't understand what was going on in the first place. And so it's frustrating. I don't like having to take staff time to be able to do all these things. When I've said before, that we're probably going to end up very close to where we were in the first place. And like Sandy said, some municipalities are going to maybe get levied more, which is not what they wanted. So it's interesting to always do an exercise to see what's happening within, but I think conservation staff already knew what was going on and how things were impacting. So I'll be glad when this is over. Hopefully it's not that much more expensive, but there's going to be cost. You can't just do all these programs and this work without it costing more. And it's a little bit frustrating that it had to happen to begin with.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands or hearing anything. So we've got the motion on the floor, and I'll call for the vote then to receive this presentation as presented. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. So that's carried. Thank you. Next item we have is 8.5, and that's just a verbal update on our annual meeting next month. And so Tracy, you've got a few comments for us on that.
Yes, thank you, Alan. Just wanted to suggest as well, much like last year, we're still in a pandemic, and I know how much Michelle loves getting together and having the lunch. With this being virtual, we're going to hold very much a regular board meeting for the AGM. We do want to present our staff with their service awards during this event like we did last year. And we do have one conservation award that we want to give out. I think it's a very timely one with them changing positions. So want to present this award at a time when they're in the role that they are. So that will be coming out, but expect very much a typical board meeting. I'm sorry to announce. We're hoping to put together some ideas for perhaps some opportunities in the summer when we can be outdoors and have a get together to perhaps even recognize another conservation award recipient at that time. So more to come, but at this stage, I think we just want to keep everyone safe and well, and we'll have a virtual meeting next month.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. And again, just a reminder that that is a Thursday meeting. It's February the 17th, so it's the one meeting of the year where we hold it on a Thursday. So next item we have is item number 9, and that is the board elections for 2022. And with that, I am going to vacate the chair and turn it over to Grant Inglis, our solicitor, and he is going to be the acting chair for the purpose of conducting the election. So Grant, over to you.
Hopefully, thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to go through the processes that we have to do every year to satisfy the regulatory requirements, and then after that, conduct these elections. So,
sorry, Grant, can I butt in just for a second?
Sure.
Alan, could I get you to ask for a mover and seconder to move the motion that Grant Inglis be nominated as acting chair for the purpose of conducting the 2022 elections?
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, I'm reading my page here and I didn't read far enough.
That's all right.
The motion is here, and so can I get a mover then that we nominate Grant as acting chair?
So moved by Sandy.
Moved by Sandy. A seconder, was that Nancy I heard?
Yeah, it is. I'll second it.
Okay, Nancy, thank you. Is there any comments or questions on the motion? Not seeing you hearing anything. So Michelle, can you do, I'll call for the vote, and Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Anna?
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, so that's carried. We've got that looked after. Okay, sorry about that, Grant. Now I can turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. So I'm just going to read through the processes that Michelle and I have come up with and then go into the elections. So the elections are to be conducted in the following order. There'll be an election of the chair, who shall be a member of the authority, the election of one or more vice chairs, who shall be members of the authority. I shall ask for nominations to each position. Only current members of the authority who are present may vote. Nominations shall be called 3 times and will only require a mover. The closing of nominations, however, shall require both a mover and a seconder. Each member nominated shall be asked to accept the nomination. The member must be present to accept the nomination unless the member has advised the Secretary Treasurer in writing or by email in advance of the election of their willingness to accept the nomination. If there is only one nominee, that individual shall be declared into the position by acclamation. If there is more than one nominee, in the event of an election, each nominee shall be permitted not more than 3 minutes to speak for the office, no filibusters, in the order of the alphabetical list of surnames. Upon the acceptance by the nominees to stand for election to the position of office, the chair shall ask the meeting host to prepare the poll. Each member will cast their vote, and once completed and closed, the acting chair will announce the successful candidate, and that candidate requires more than 50% of the vote to be elected. A majority vote shall be required for election if there are more than 2 nominees, and upon the first vote, no nominee receives the majority required for election. The name of the person with the least number of votes shall be removed from further consideration for the office, and a new poll shall be created. In the case of a vote where no nominee receives the majority required for election, and where 2 or more nominees are tied with the least number of votes, a special vote shall be taken to decide which one of such tied nominees' names shall be dropped from the list of names to be voted on in the next vote. Should there be a tie vote between 2 remaining candidates, a new poll shall be created and a second vote held. Should there still be a tie after the second poll, a third vote shall be held. And should there be a tie after that third vote, the election of the office shall be decided by lot drawn by the acting chair or designate. And there's going to be a designate. So I'll then go in to the election of the chair, and I'll call for nominations for the position of chair of the Upper Thames, and that's the first time.
I'd like to nominate Alan Dale.
Okay, seeing or hearing no other, I'll call for the nominations for position of the chair the second time. And the third time, I'll call for the nomination for the position of chair of the Upper Thames. Okay, thank you. I'll need a motion to close the nominations, and I need a mover and a seconder.
Paul Mitchell moves to close nominations.
Anna Hopkins seconds.
Okay, and Michelle, can you call the roll, please?
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Alan, are you prepared to accept the nomination?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Then I declare you as the chair of the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority by acclamation. Now, I'm going to do the very same thing for vice chair. So I'll open that up. I'll call for the nomination of the vice chair the first time.
I'll nominate Brian Petrie.
I'll call for the second nomination for the vice chair of the Upper Thames. And I'll call for the third nomination for vice chair of the Upper Thames. Seeing none, I need a motion to close nominations. I need a mover and a seconder.
I'll move it, Jim Reffel.
Jim Reffel.
I'll second it.
Joe Salter seconded. And Michelle, can you call the roll, please?
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes.
Thank you, Michelle. Brian, are you prepared to accept the nomination for vice chair?
I am.
Thank you very much. I declare that you are the vice chair of the Upper Thames by acclamation. Congratulations to both of you. Do you wish the opportunity, either the chair and vice chair, to say a few words about your nominators or speak to your appointment?
I'm going to wait until everything is all concluded, and then I've got a few words I'd like to say. I don't know, Brian, if you've got something you want to add at this point.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you. I really enjoy the position. Alan's a great leader in chair, so it makes the job pretty easy. But certainly had an opportunity over the last year to learn a lot. And thank you, Sandy, for the nomination. Again, your guidance on the board has been very strong as well. And I think we got a great board, and it makes the job pretty easy. So,
Well, thank you very much. The next thing is the election of the hearing committee. And the hearings committee consists of the chair, the vice chair, the past authority chair, and 2 additional members. So in this case, I believe there will be 2, I need 2 members to complete this hearing committee. So as before, I'm going to call for nominations for positions on the hearing committee 3 times. And I'll open that up. That's the first time. Can you give me nominations for the hearings committee?
I would
nominate Tony.
I'm sorry?
Oh, never mind. I was going to nominate Tony.
Okay. Tony Jackson. That's 1.
I nominate Marie Blosh.
Marie Blosh. Thank you. Are there any others? Any other nominations at this point? So I'll call for a second time nominations for the positions on the hearings committee.
Sorry, does Sandy Levin already stand on the hearings committee? He
He's
does. Okay,
past-
just want to make sure. Okay, perfect.
Past chair. I'll call for a third time for the nominations for positions on the hearing committee? Seeing none, I need a motion then to close nominations. I need a mover and a seconder.
I will close. Anna Hopkins.
Anna's moving it. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second Brian.
Brian Petrie, the seconder. Michelle, will you call a roll, please?
Murray Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes.
Tony, are you prepared to accept this nomination for membership on the hearings committee?
Yes.
Thank you. Marie, are you prepared to accept this nomination for the position on the hearings committee?
Oh, yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Since there are only two nominees, I declare that you two are, you will have your positions by acclamation. Now, the last, no, it's not the last. The second last one is the election of the Finance and Audit Committee. And the Finance and Audit Committee consists of the chair and 2 to 4 additional members. So as before, I'll call the first nomination for positions on the Finance and Audit Committee, and I need 2 to 4.
I'll nominate Jim Reffel.
Thank you.
I'll nominate Anna Marie Murray if she will serve and if she gave notice as needed.
Yes, I'll officially confirm when we go over it, but at the end, but yes.
That's 2. I can handle 2 more.
I'd like to nominate Sandy Levin.
Okay. I'll call then for a second time for nominations for the position on the Finance and Audit Committee.
I will note, just to remind everyone that the only position that is the only person that does not need to be nominated to be on the committee is Alan. The vice chair is not automatically put on the committee. Just want to remind everyone of that.
Thank you.
We have had issues in the
Mitchell
past.
nominates Brian.
Brian Petrie. I'll call then for the third time for nominations for members of our Finance and Audit Committee. I have Jim Reffel, I have Anne Marie, I have Sandy, and I have Brian. Are there any others? No, seeing none. I need to close these nominations, and I need a mover and a seconder.
I'll move it. It's Nancy. Oh,
Nancy move and Anna
I'll second.
second. Can you call the roll, please? Michelle?
Yes. Murray Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I inquire whether the 4 of you are prepared to sit on the Finance and Audit Committee for the Upper Thames for the following year.
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Jim, Anne
Yes.
Marie,
I can respond on behalf of Anna Marie.
Anne Marie, Sandy,
Yeah,
and Brian.
Yes.
Since there are 4, I declare you in your positions by acclamation. Now, the last one I have is the election of the Source Water Protection Committee Liaison Striking Committee. And that is one person. So I'll open that nomination.
I'd like to nominate Joe Salter.
Thank you. Seeing no others, I'll ask for a second time. Any further nominations for the position on the Source Water Protection Committee? No. I'll ask for a third time. Are there any other persons that you wish to nominate for that position? I need a motion to close nominations. I need a mover and a seconder.
So moved.
Brian moving,
Nancy, so seconded.
Nancy seconding. Thank you. Michelle, can you read the roll, please?
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
yes,
Margaret Lupton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes,
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
yes,
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Alex Westman,
yes,
and Alan Dale.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Joe, are you prepared to let your name stand for the nomination?
yes, I am.
Thank you very much. You are declared into that position by acclamation. My time is done. My 3 minutes of fame are gone.
Well, for this year, every year we'll have you back and you can do it again. So,
Well, I can just add them up, okay? Congratulations to all of you, and thank you for your work.
well, thank you, Grant. And yes, thank you for, it's not just the work you do conduct the election, but you're at all of our meetings, and many times we call upon you for some guidance. So we certainly appreciate the role you play here at the authority.
Always fun.
Good. It is about 12 noon and we're almost done the meeting. So I'll try to keep this brief, but real quickly, I would like to thank Sandy for the nomination. I'd like to thank and congratulate Brian again on being vice chair. We've got Tony and Marie on hearings committee. Jim and Anna Marie, Sandy, and Brian are also on finance and audit. And we've got Joe back again on the Source Water Protection Striking Committee and liaison committee again. Certainly appreciate everyone that steps forward and accepts some responsibility and takes on the role. There's a lot that goes on, and great to see others and appreciate the efforts they put into it. I already thanked Grant for his role and his work that helps us out. It's also thank you to staff. We have a great staff here at the Upper Thames, and staff can make a board look good or they can make you look bad. And we have a staff that makes us look really good. We ask for information, they get it to us, a lot of background. This is a big organization. We've got a big budget and a lot of moving parts, and staff are able to pull it all together and keep us informed and get us the information that we need that, you know, put us in a position to make some good decisions. So certainly appreciate the board, the people on the board who are taking positions of authority and leadership, and also a thank you to staff. I just wanted to add a few personal comments at this time. My eldest daughter, she's in her final year at Carleton University. So she lives up in Ottawa. And I talk to her quite regularly thanks to modern technology and FaceTime. And she's busy up there, final year of study doing geography. And she's working on her thesis. and she works part-time for the federal government. And she's just been accepted to some graduate school in September. She will be doing it virtually, but she has been accepted out in Nova Scotia at the Center for Geographic Sciences. And she'll be studying GIS and cartography. So she calls me up all the time and we talk, and she's feeling a little overwhelmed with all this going on. And I'm sure we can all relate to that feeling of overwhelmingness and everything happening, and I feel like we've got the weight of the world on us. So I tell her the same thing that people told me when I was in university. And it's a question, and the question is, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is that you eat it one bite at a time. So no matter how big the meal, no matter how much you have on your plate, you just deal with it one bite at a time, one step at a time. So we've been through a rough couple of years. 2022 is going to be another challenging year. We've got so many changes to the Conservation Authorities Act to deal with. Tracy just outlined this in her report. So much to figure out, and the timelines coming forward and what we have to do to meet those schedules. We've got a continuation of this COVID-19 pandemic, which kind of hamstrings our efforts and the ability for everyone to get together and to meet and to plan and coordinate and get the work done. This year, we're also going to have a provincial election, and we'll see what fallout there is, what changes as a result of the provincial election. Right after that, there will be a municipal election. So there could be a lot of changes to the political landscape by the end of this year. And on top of all that, we have climate change, which is just an unknown. We feel like we've got so much to do, and yet it feels like we're under pressure for time to get it done. And as soon as we can play catch up, somebody's moved the goalposts further away. And yet we seem to be running out of time. So that's overwhelming and bearing on us. And we don't know with these extreme weather events. I mean, staff are in a position where, are we going to get some severe weather events and some flooding, or are we going to be suddenly faced with drought conditions? In the last few years, we've seen, and this was mentioned in the FYI report about extended season before we get our first frost, and how difficult it's been for staff to get out and to do spraying and doing field work, because that first frost has been delayed. And I can relate to that. I read the FYI report and I was thinking, yeah, it was the 1st of November and I still had green leaves on tulip trees. And it just seems like how do you deal with that and try to get your workload done and things you normally had done when the leaves came off? And what do you get done before, in the springtime? Well, suddenly now we might have a late frost. We might not. We may have a heat wave. We may have a terrible year this year for blue-green algae. We don't know what curveballs are going to get thrown our way. But I would like to commend the board and the staff for all the hard work and efforts that got us through the last couple of years. And I know if we take it one bite, one step at a time, we will persevere and get through 2022. So thank you very much, everyone. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you during the upcoming year. So with that, next item on the agenda is item number 10. The FYI report is there, and I alluded to that. Lots of good information in there about the work that staff have been up to. And once again, a beautiful picture of a bird on there. I really enjoy those. I'm not really up on my birds and don't recognize them all, but I do enjoy those pictures. That's good information. So lots of activity out there in the field. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the FYI report? I'm not seeing or hearing anything. Again, drought in the summer, wet weather in the fall, and we're doing seeding by helicopter. Absolutely incredible. And and yet we still have green vegetation in the fall and unable to get the leaves to drop off and do some spray activity. So it's certainly a challenge for staff. If there's no comments or questions on item number 10, item number 11 is other business. I've talked a lot, so I'm going to turn it over to Tracy for some comments under other business.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate your words. I'll try to remember that advice as well. I've heard that before, one bite at a time, and it certainly holds true when there's so many things coming at us. But I think I'll speak for staff. I've heard many staff commend the work of our board, the work that you do, Alan, the work that Brian has done is in our leadership to guide us through these processes and to be such a support system. So again, I think it goes both ways. We can appreciate each other and we recognize the importance of what our roles are and the work that we're doing. So thank you. I just wanted to highlight a couple things because as Alan mentioned, the AGM is Thursday, February 17th. So that's going to be here before we know it. It's unique that it's a Thursday, but yeah, it seems much earlier in the month than we typically had with February being a short month. So we'll be back with you in February to finalize our inventories of programs and services and our final budget preparations as well. And I know Michelle has been wanting to schedule a meeting with Nigel Bellchamber on a training session on our updated administrative bylaws. So a few things coming forward to this next month, but we'll keep you abreast of any dates that might need to be held for that bylaw training session. With that, I'll end there because I know we're getting late and you know, certain people like to eat around lunchtime. I grew up in a family where everyone started getting hangry. So I know we have one more item on the agenda. So.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, Tracy. And I know I just got a message here from Alex. He has to, he's going to be leaving for going to work. So thank you, Alex. Appreciate you being able to stick around this far in the meeting. So thank you, and we'll talk to you soon. And we have one other item here is a closed session. So we need to go into closed session. If I could get Marie to move that, and since Alex is leaving, maybe I could get Sandy to second that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. And that's that we move into closed session to discuss litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the authority. So I'll call for the vote, and Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lepton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg.
Yes.
Is Alex Westman? Is he still in the meeting? No, he's gone. Okay. And Alan Dale.
Yes. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. So we're going to go into closed session, and I will get Emily, please, to sort of put everyone else in the waiting room, and we'll just give her a few minutes to get that set up for us.
Yes.
You're prepared.
Yeah,
If you weren't prepared, then you would have needed them.
exactly. Okay, we're back live, Alan.
Okay, thanks. I think, yeah, we've got everyone back, and we're back on the live in open session. So I have a motion to deal with that matter. So if I could get Margaret to move it and Sandy to second it, that the board of directors receive the report as presented in closed session for information. So Margaret?
I so move.
Second.
And Sandy seconds that. Thank you. If there's no comments or questions on the motion, I'm going to call for the vote. And Michelle, if you could do the roll, please.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Sandy Levin,
Yes.
Margaret Lepton,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Alan Dale.
Yes. So that's carried. Thank you very much. And just before we adjourn, once again, I would sincerely like to thank the board for your confidence in me. I enjoyed being the chair last year. It certainly was a challenge, and it certainly was a little different than what I expected with the pandemic, because you're not doing the things you normally think of doing. But thank you again for allowing me to carry on this chair for 2022. And I would like to congratulate everyone else who was successful today in serving in other ways on the board. And with that, it's been a long meeting, lots of activity, and I thank you very much. And I will ask Nancy for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn at 12:21.
Very good. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. And the next few days are going to be cold, and then it sounds like it's going to warm up. So enjoy the winter weather, and we'll see you